My mother waited until the plates were cleared to set a pen down next to my water glass. Not the good pen, the one from my father's desk, with his initials worn off the cap. She placed it so the tip pointed at me, the way you'd lay out a knife for someone who'd forgotten which fork to use. Then she folded her hands and waited, and the whole table waited with her. My father at the head, my brother beside her with his jaw working like he was chewing something that wasn't there, my younger sister across from me, scraping frosting off a plate that was already clean. I know the sound my family makes when it has already decided something. It isn't loud. It's the quiet of a room where everyone has practiced their lines except you. We took a vote, my mother said. She smiled the small, tucked smile she uses at church. Before you got here, it only seemed fair. I set my hands in my lap where no one could see them. There was a single sheet of paper face down in front of my father. He turned it over with 2 fingers and slid it toward the center of the table, and my mother slid it the rest of the way to me. And then she said the thing she'd clearly been saving all week. The thing that was supposed to make me pick up that pen. No husband, no kids. She said it gently, like a diagnosis. Your money was always meant to save this family, Myra. That's what it's for. A pause. That's what you're for. The furnace kicked on under the floor. I remember that. I remember counting the little embroidered roses on the tablecloth my grandmother had hemmed by hand. Because if I looked at any single face at that table, I was going to say something I could never take back. So I didn't read the paper. I pushed my chair back and I stood up, and that would have been the whole story. The good daughter, $62,000. A pen, except my brother's wife had been silent all night, in the chair by the wall where they always seat her, and when I reached the front door, she came after me. She caught my sleeve out on the porch, in the cold. She looked back at the lit window once before she said it, and her hand was shaking against my arm. Don't sign it. Her voice barely made it out of her. Whatever they tell you that paper is, don't sign. Ask them whose name is already on that loan. The porch light buzzed over both our heads. I drove home with both hands on the wheel and the heater roaring, and I did not cry. That surprised me more than anything my mother had said. Somewhere around the second red light, I noticed my jaw ached from how hard I was holding it, and that my sister-in-law's voice was still going in me, under everything, like a wire pulled tight. Whose name is already on that loan? I didn't call anyone. I didn't text the 2 friends who would have said the right furious things. I went home to my quiet apartment with its one reading lamp and its shelf of paid-off, boring mind things, and I opened my laptop and I started a folder, the way I do at work when a claim smells wrong. I named the folder the date. Then I sat there with my heart going, and I made myself breathe. If you have ever been the one person in your family who was loved like a line item, the reliable one, the fund, the fix, then you already know the sound of that dinner, and you already know why I opened a folder instead of a bottle of wine. My name is Myra Foster. I'm 34, and if any of that lands too close to home, tell me in the comments. I read them, and I think you're going to want to be here for what my brother's wife knew. Stay with me, because to understand that porch, you have to go back 6 weeks, to a Tuesday, and to a box. The box came from my mother, of all people. She'd been cleaning out the back closet and set aside a carton of my grandmother's things, with my name on the side in black marker, Myra, and told me to come get it before she donated the rest. I should have heard the music under that. My mother does not save things for me. But my grandmother had been gone 2 years by then, and I wanted anything of hers. So I drove over on a Tuesday after work and carried the box to my car myself because no one offered. Most of it was what you'd expect. A rolling pin worn smooth in the middle, a coffee tin of buttons, a church cookbook with the spine taped twice, and at the bottom, heavier than it looked, my grandmother's ledger, the long green record book she'd kept for the bakery she ran for 31 years on Almond Street. Back when a woman running her own shop was a small scandal my family only admitted was impressive after she died. I opened it in the parking lot with the door still open and the dome light on. Her handwriting stood up off the page, like she was sitting in the seat next to me. Columns of it. Flour, sugar, the Delgado wedding, 2 dozen short on a Friday. A name, a number, a name, a number. And in the margins, in a child's careful pencil, my own handwriting from the summers I sat on a stool beside her while she taught me to read those columns. Always read every line, she used to say, tapping the page with one floury finger. The story's never in the big number, Myra. It's in the little ones nobody checks. That's my whole career, if you want to know. I read insurance claims for a hospital system. I find the one line in 1,000 that doesn't belong. The charge that's doubled, the code that's wrong, the signature that doesn't match the file. My family liked to say, I pushed paper. My grandmother would have understood exactly what I did and why. On the last page, under the final month she ever balanced, she'd written all our names in a list, the way she did every New Year. And beside mine, she'd added 3 words I didn't understand for a long time. Keep her close. G. I thought it was affection. I traced it with my thumb, and I set the ledger on my passenger seat like a person, and I drove home. I had no idea I just carried the only honest record of my own name out of that house. The first call came 3 days later, on a Friday, which is how I knew it was choreographed. My mother saves hard conversations for Fridays, so you'll stew all weekend. She started warm. She always starts warm. She asked about my knee, which I've never hurt. She meant a coworker's knee, from a story I'd told her a year ago, and half kept. Then, in the same soft voice, she got to it. Your brother's in a tight spot, sweetheart. The business. A pause built for me to fill. I didn't fill it. We're all going to come together on this. That's what this family does. I ask the only question I know how to ask. How much and to whom and for what? My mother laughed like I'd told a joke at a funeral. Does it matter between family? I stood in my kitchen and watched my own reflection in the dark window, and I felt the old machinery start up in my chest. The part of me that had been the fix since I was 19, the year my father lost the first job, and I gave back my dorm deposit without being asked. Let me see the paperwork, I said, and I'll see what I can do. The line went quiet, in a way that had nothing to do with the connection. It's handled, my mother said. You just need to be ready to help. She hung up before I could answer. I stood there holding a dead phone, and somewhere under the floor of me, a very small alarm I'd spent 30 years learning to ignore began, quietly to ring. The following Sunday, there was a dinner. There is always a dinner. My mother makes a roast when she wants something, the way other people bring a lawyer. The whole cast was there when I walked in. My father in his chair with the TV muted. My brother Danny on the couch, turning his phone over and over in his hands. My sister Corinne, setting the table with the loud precision of a person building an alibi. And in the corner, on the hard chair by the bookshelf, my brother's wife, Bethany, with a glass of water she wasn't drinking, and a smile she'd put on in the car. I said hi to her, and she said hi back to my shoes. We got through the roast, we got through my father's one story. Then my mother set her fork down at an angle, and the room changed temperature, and I understood that dinner had been the toll, and now came the bridge. Danny, my mother said, tell your sister. My brother has a way of making bad news sound like weather. The business had hit a rough patch. A big commercial job that went sideways, a supplier who walked, a bridge loan he'd taken to keep the crew paid, $62,000, with a balloon payment coming due, and if he didn't clear it by spring, he'd lose the trucks, and if he lost the trucks, he'd lose the company. And did I remember how proud Dad was the day he painted Foster on the doors? I remember, I said, and I did. I also remembered lending Danny $4,000 3 years ago. That turned into a story about how I'd never really given it. I'd invested it. And investments don't always pay off, do they? But I don't lead with the ledger of old wounds. I lead with the question. Okay, I said, Show me the loan, the actual paper. Who's the lender? What's the rate? What's the payoff? What's the balloon? Let me look at it the way I look at things. And I'll tell you the smartest way to help. Maybe I refinance a piece of it. Maybe there's a hardship program. I do this all day. You would have thought I'd asked to read my mother's diary. See, this is what she does, Corinne said to the table, not to me. Somebody's drowning, and she wants to audit the water. I want to help correctly, I said. And I kept my voice level, because the second you raise your voice in my family, you've handed them the argument. I can't fix a number I'm not allowed to see. It's handled, my mother said. The same 2 words from the phone, laid down now like a card she'd been holding. The paperwork is handled. What Danny needs from you isn't your opinion, Myra. It's a check. Family doesn't make family show receipts. And there it was, the whole shape of it, if I'd been able to see. They didn't want my expertise. They had never once, in 34 years, wanted my expertise. They wanted the part of me that writes the check and doesn't read the paper. I looked around that table at the people who taught me to read every line, and not one of them would show me a single one. I'll think about it, I said. It was the bravest sentence I had in me that night. Danny wouldn't look at me. Bethany looked at me then. Really looked. One flat, frightened second. And looked away. I should have felt insulted. Mostly I felt cold. But I am, or I was, a hoper. And the next morning the hoper woke up first and made a plan to fix everything the honest way. This is the part I'm least proud of, and most understand. I did not yet suspect the truth. I thought my family was being proud and stupid and secretive the way families are, and I thought I could love them out of it, with competence, because competence was the only love language I'd ever been allowed to speak with them. So I called my mother back on Monday, and I made her an offer that still, when I think about it, makes my chest ache for the woman I was that morning. I told her I wanted to help Danny, really help him. I said I'd sit down with a lender myself. I do this every day, I said. I know how to talk to these people. I know what a hardship restructure looks like, and what a fair one costs. I offered to put $10,000 of my own money toward a legitimate restructure. Right then, no strings, the moment I could see the actual terms. $10,000. I had it. I offered it the way you offer your coat to someone shivering. And I meant it. And I want you to hold on to the fact that I meant it, because of what happened next. My mother went quiet. Not the warm quiet. The calculating one. You don't need to call the lender, she said. Why would you call the lender? Because that's how you actually fix this, Mom. You don't just throw a check at a balloon payment. You restructure the whole. Danny will handle the lender. Fast. Too fast. You just. And she caught herself, and I heard her decide to be warm again, the way you hear a driver decide to change lanes. Sweetheart, this is what I mean. You make everything so complicated. He doesn't need a meeting. He needs the family to close the gap. 10,000 isn't the gap. You know what the gap is. Then show me the gap, I said. Show me one statement and I'll wire more than 10. Let me see it and I'll help, however it actually needs helping. I'll even go to the lender with him. Sit right next to him. We'll do it together. No. Not warm anymore. A single flat syllable. And behind it, faintly, I heard my brother's voice in the same room, saying something I couldn't make out, urgent and low, and my mother's hand going over the phone, and then her coming back too bright. No, honey, that's not necessary. Danny's embarrassed enough. The last thing he needs is his little sister marching into his lender's office to fix his life for him. Can you imagine? You'd humiliate him. I sat with that. It was such a good move. It turned my offer to stand beside my brother into an act of cruelty against him. Everything in that family became, eventually, a thing I was doing to them. Okay, I said slowly. Then I won't go to the lender. But I'm not wiring money into a number I can't see. That's not me being difficult, Mom. That's me being someone who'd like to help correctly, and not just expensively. That's when Corinne got on the phone, because of course she'd been listening, Because in my family, a private call is just a meeting that hasn't invited everyone yet. You know what your problem is? She said. You can't stand not being in control. Danny comes to you, humble, on his knees, and you turn it into an interrogation because it kills you that for once somebody has something you can't fix with a spreadsheet. She was breathing hard. Just because you're alone doesn't mean the rest of us have to live like accountants. There it was again. Alone. They reached for it the way you reach for a knife you keep in the same drawer. And I noticed, even then, even before I knew anything, that the entire conversation had bent itself around a single strange shape. I had offered money. I had offered more money. I had offered my time, my expertise, my Saturday, my presence beside my brother in the worst room of his life, and every single offer had been refused. And only one thing had made my mother's voice change, and my brother's voice go urgent behind her hand. The lender. The word lender was the tripwire. Not the money, not the amount. The idea of me in a room with the people who'd loaned it. I love you, I said, because I did. God help me. And I hung up, and I sat at my kitchen table and I did the arithmetic that finally didn't add up, no matter how I ran it. If Danny were simply drowning, they'd have taken my 10,000 and my meeting and my help and wept with relief. Drowning people don't refuse the rope because they don't like the color of it. They'd refuse the rope. They'd refused every version of the rope, which meant they didn't want to be pulled out of the water. They wanted me in it. I couldn't leave it alone. That's the thing my family has always both used and hated about me. I cannot leave a wrong line alone. It itches. So that week, I did the small, ordinary things a person does when a story doesn't add up. I asked Danny to get coffee, just us, and I watched him talk around every question, like a man walking around a hole in his own floor. When I asked the name of the lender, he said some online outfit you wouldn't know them, and changed the subject to the Cowboys. When I asked to see one statement, one page, he said his accountant had everything, and his accountant was slammed. Danny doesn't have an accountant. Danny has me and had been careful that week not to. I drove him back to his shop after, and while he ran in to grab something, I sat in the passenger seat of his work truck, with the heater ticking, and I did the thing I'm not proud of, and would do again. I looked, not through anything locked, just the door pocket, stuffed with the debris of a man who files by throwing receipts, a parking ticket, a fast food bag, and a torn, windowed envelope, the kind a lender sends with the return address ripped half off. I could still read the part that mattered. A name I did read all day at work, a fintech lender, the kind that moves money in an afternoon with a photo of your license and a tap of your thumb. I didn't take it. I photographed it and put it back exactly as it lay, angled, under the fast food bag. Then Danny came jogging out, and I asked him about the Cowboys, and he lit up, relieved, and never knew the temperature in his own truck had dropped 10 degrees. That night I called the lender. I told myself I was just going to ask general questions. Hypothetically, for a friend, the way you do. The hold music was a xylophone pretending to be calm. When the rep came on, I gave Danny's name and said I was family, trying to help him get current. And could she tell me the payoff? I'm sorry, she said, pleasant and immovable. I'm not showing an active loan under that name. I felt the first thread pull loose. Maybe it's under the business, I said. Foster Heating and Air. Keys clicking. No, ma'am, nothing commercial. A pause, and then the sentence that stopped my heart in my chest. I do have a personal installment loan in this household, but I can only discuss it with the account holder. For verification, can you confirm you're the borrower? I just need the last four of the social on the account, and the borrower's full name is... And she started to say a name that did not begin with Daniel. I hung up before she finished it. I sat on my kitchen floor with the phone face down on the tile, and I did not need her to finish, because I already knew the shape of the letters her mouth was making, and they spelled me. Here is the thing no one tells you about a betrayal this size. Your first feeling isn't rage. It's a desperate, childish hope that you're wrong. All that weekend, I built reasons for it to be a mistake. A mix-up, a shared address, a lazy rep reading the wrong line off a screen. I do this for a living, I told myself, and half of what looks like fraud is just somebody's typo. I wanted a typo, the way I have never wanted anything. Because the alternative was that the people who raised me had reached into the middle of my life and taken the one thing I'd never handed over. So I didn't pull the record. Not yet. I know how that sounds. From out there, where you can see the whole board. But you have to understand what the confirmation would cost. As long as I didn't look, they were still my family, and I was still the daughter who might be wrong. The moment I looked, I'd be something else. And I didn't know yet if I was brave enough to be it. They did not give me the weekend in peace. My mother started what I've come to think of as the campaign. It was masterful, I'll give her that. It never once mentioned money. She called to tell me my father hadn't been sleeping. She called to say Danny's youngest had asked why Uncle's trucks were going away. She sent a photo of the four of us at the lake in 1999. No caption, just the picture. Me maybe 7, gap-toothed, being held up on my brother's shoulders, all of us laughing at something outside the frame. I looked at that little girl, and my throat closed. Then Corinne took the family group chat. She's the enforcer. My mother is only ever the queen who did not personally give the order. Corinne posted a long paragraph about how some people in this family think they're better than the rest of us because they have a fancy job and no one to answer to, about how our grandmother must be turning over, watching us fight, about how Grandma Foster believed in family before pride. She tagged me. Everyone but me, heart reacted it. That's the one that got through the wall, not the money. Grandmother. I sat that night at my kitchen table with the ledger open in front of me, and I read her columns until the numbers swam, and for about an hour, I lost the thread of myself entirely. I thought, maybe I am hard. Maybe I do audit the water while people drown. Maybe the loving thing, the thing she'd have wanted, is to write the check and swallow the question and be the daughter they can use. Because being used by your family is at least a kind of being kept. I actually reached for my banking app. I got as far as the transfer screen. My savings sat there, 11 years of it. The number I'd built, one careful line at a time. The closest thing I had to proof that I existed on my own. And my thumb wouldn't move. I looked back down at the ledger, at that last page, at keep her close, and something in me that had been very quiet for a very long time said, in my grandmother's exact voice, "The story's never in the big number, Myra. It's in the little ones nobody checks." She didn't teach me to read every line, so I could close my eyes on the most important one of my life. I shut the app. I shut the ledger. I put both hands flat on the table until they stopped shaking. It was the first time in that whole 6 weeks that I cried, and I cried for about 90 seconds, alone, with the reading lamp on. And then I stopped and got out my laptop and requested my credit report from all 3 bureaus. The real one, the certified one, because my grandmother did not raise a coward, and I was done being one. The next morning my mother called and announced, in the bright voice of a woman scheduling a christening, that we'd all be getting together Saturday. "A family meeting," she said, "to settle this once and for all. Just us. Wear something nice." The report did not come Saturday. That was the first snag, and it nearly broke me. 2 of the 3 bureaus came back fine. Thin, boring mine. The third came back with a flag. My file was locked behind a mismatch. Additional verification required. Please confirm your identity. And among the addresses it listed, to confirm was one I had never lived at. A duplex on a street across town, tied to my name, active. I sat looking at that address for a long time. I've never so much as parked on that street. But somebody had lived my name there long enough to get mail. I started the verification, It takes days. The Bureau mails a code to the addresses on file, including, of course, the one I don't control. I was locked out of my own record by the very people who'd broken into it. If you have ever tried to prove you are yourself to a machine that has been taught your face by a thief, you know the specific madness of that week. I filed the forms. I waited. And Saturday came, whether I was ready or not. Bethany found me the day before it. I was in the cereal aisle of the grocery store 2 towns over, the one I drive to specifically, so I won't see anyone I know. And there she was at the end of the aisle, with an empty cart, and eyes that had been crying in the car. My sister-in-law and I have never been close. The family made sure of that. You don't let the two people you're using compare notes. She walked up like she was approaching something that might bolt. I keep starting texts to you and deleting them, she said. No hello. For 2 weeks. Bethany, I can't be part of this. Her hands were tight on the cart bar. I told Danny I can't. I have a daughter, Myra. I'm not going to teach her that this is what a family does. She looked down the aisle both ways. This reflex I'd see her do again on the porch. Saturday. Whatever they put in front of you. Saturday. Don't. A woman rounded the corner with a toddler, and Bethany's whole face closed like a door. I have to go, she said, too loud, for the stranger's benefit. And she left her empty cart sitting there and walked out. I stood in the cereal aisle holding a box I don't even eat. I understood 2 things, and no more. Bethany knew, and Bethany was afraid. Not embarrassed, not conflicted, afraid. You don't check both ends of a grocery aisle over a family squabble about a loan. You do it when you know it's a crime. You already know how Saturday ended. You watched it. The pen, the vote, the note. My mother telling me what I'm for. Me standing up. Bethany on the cold porch, with her hand shaking on my sleeve. Let me give you back the parts you couldn't see the first time. The parts I only understood because of the 6 weeks I've just walked you through. I understood, this time, why they seated everyone before I arrived, so I'd walk into a jury already sworn. I understood the vote was theater. You don't vote on a thing you've already done. You vote to make the person you did it to feel outnumbered while you make her sign. And when my father slid that single sheet to the middle of the table, face down, it turned over for half a second in the draft from the furnace vent, and I saw the top of it. I didn't register it then. I was too busy keeping my face still. But it printed itself on the back of my eyes, and I've never lost it since. A logo. Blue, lowercase, friendly. The same fintech lender from the torn envelope in my brother's truck. The note was not a family IOU. The note had their letterhead on it. Whatever my mother wanted me to sign came from the company that already had my name. And my brother, my big brother, who carried me on his shoulders at the lake, sat there through the whole vote with his jaw grinding, and when I stood to leave, he looked up at me for 1 second and mouthed 2 words with no sound behind them. I'm sorry, not sorry enough to speak. Just sorry enough to want the credit for feeling it. So when Bethany caught me on that porch and told me to ask whose name was already on the loan, she wasn't warning me about something I might discover someday. She was telling me they were 40 minutes from getting my signature on it. Don't sign, she said. She meant, don't put your own hand to the thing that makes it yours. I drove home. You know that part. What you don't know is what was waiting Monday. The bureau verification cleared Monday morning, 10:40, while I was at my desk between 2 claims. The lock came off my file. And there it was, sitting in the middle of my own credit history, like a stranger asleep in my bed. A personal installment loan. Original balance $62,000. Opened 14 months ago. I have never applied for a loan in my adult life. I pay cash and I hate debt the way children of chaos hate chaos. I sat very still at my desk, and I did the thing I do all day, which is read the fine print instead of feeling my feelings. I pulled the certified file. It took 3 days and a notarized request, and I got it. And the fine print, told me everything the dinner never would. The loan was opened online. The application carried my full legal name, my social, my date of birth. It carried a signature, an electronic one, a typed and styled cursive font a machine calls a signature, dated a Tuesday at 11:52 in the morning. A Tuesday I could account for down to the minute because it was a workday, and I was in a compliance meeting on the ninth floor with 11 other people, my phone in a basket by the door. The contact email on the loan was not mine. It was close. My name, a number, at a common domain. The kind of near-miss address a person makes when they want the alerts to land somewhere I'd never see them. The verification address was the duplex across town. The bank account the funds were wired to, 3 days later, was not mine either. I didn't recognize the routing at first. Then I did. It was the account Danny uses for the shop. There was no typo. There had never been a typo. I had wanted one so badly, and there wasn't one. 14 months ago, on a Tuesday, while I sat in a meeting, someone who knew my social by heart sat down at a screen, wore my name like a coat, borrowed $62,000 as me, and steered it into my brother's account. And then, this past Saturday, they had tried to get me to sign a paper acknowledging that debt as mine. To make it real, to make it chosen, to turn a forgery I could report into a loan I could only pay. Bethany's whole warning fit in my hand now, like a key. If I signed, I ratified it. I'd stop being the victim of the crime and start being the co-author of it. I want to tell you I felt rage. What I actually felt, sitting there with the certified file, was the floor of my whole life quietly rearranging. Every loan I'd invested, every emergency I'd covered, every time being needed had felt like being loved. I had to hold all of it up to this new light and check it for forgeries too. That's the part that guts you. Not the 62,000. The rereading of your entire life. I got out the ledger. I don't know why, except that I needed my grandmother in the room. I opened it to the last page, and I put my thumb on "Keep her close." And for the first time I understood, there were two ways to read those 3 words, and my family had been reading them their way my whole life. She meant, love her. She's the good one. Don't let her drift. They heard, keep her handy, keep the account open, keep her close enough to reach. I closed the book. I stopped waiting to be wrong. If you're still with me, and if some part of your own chest went cold just now, because you know exactly what it is to have your kindness quietly rewritten into an obligation, do me one favor before I tell you what I did next. Hit subscribe so the rest of this finds its way back to you. Because I did not scream, and I did not call my mother, and I did not drive over there and throw the certified file on the roast. I opened my folder, the one named for the date, and I started to build. I don't win the loud way. I win the way my grandmother balanced 31 years of books that a bank once tried to close on her. One honest line at a time. The first line I read told me to keep reading. Here's a thing I know from work that most people don't. Fraud is almost never a single event. It's a habit. The person who forges one signature and gets away with it does not stop. They've found a door that opens, and they keep walking through it. So I didn't just pull the $62,000 loan. I pulled everything. I ordered my full file from all 3 bureaus, uncertified and then certified. And I sat down at my kitchen table on a Wednesday night with a legal pad, and I did to my own life what I do to a stranger's hospital account. I read every line. There were 3. The 62,000 was the newest, the loud one, the one for Danny's trucks. But underneath it, quieter, older, were 2 more. A personal line of credit, $34,000, opened 2 years ago, drawn down almost to the limit, and never touched since. And beneath that, the first one, the original, a $45,000 installment loan, opened 3 years back. The same near-miss email, the same duplex address, and this one different in one detail that made me put my pen down and press both hands flat on the table again. This one had a wet signature, not a font, an actual scanned ink signature on a notarized page. Someone's hand pretending to be my hand, looping the M and the F the way I've never once written them. $141,000 in my name, across 3 years. I had been an open account at my own family's bank for a third of a decade, and I had brought them a roast every Sunday and thanked them for having me. And then I followed the money, because the money is where the little numbers nobody checks all live, and the money told me the part that turned this from a brother's desperation into something colder. The 62,000 went to Danny's shop. I'd seen that. But the older 45, the first one, the notarized one, split. Half of it went to the shop. The other half, 22,000 and change, went out 3 days later in a single transfer to an account I did recognize, because I'd sent birthday money to it for years. My parents' account, the house. The house they have told every cousin, every neighbor, every person at every barbecue for a decade, was paid off. The house my mother calls the one thing we did right. Somewhere in the middle of that 3-year habit, my parents had needed money too. And the family bank. Me, my name, my social, my credit that I'd built one careful line at a time precisely because I was the one who feared debt, had been open for them as well. My father hadn't lost a job and quietly borrowed against his kid. He'd sat at a screen, or let Danny sit at a screen, and reached into the future of the daughter he called no husband, no kids. And he'd taken a piece of it to keep up the story that he'd never needed anyone. I did not sleep that night. I want to be honest about that because I've made myself sound very controlled and I wasn't. Not underneath. Underneath I was a 7-year-old, on her brother's shoulders at the lake, wondering which of those laughing faces had first typed her name into a machine. But by morning, the 7-year-old had gone back to sleep, and the woman who reads claims was awake, and she made a list. And 2 days after the list, the mailbox handed me a clock. It was a letter from the lender, not from collections, from the fraud review unit. Routine, it said, a periodic portfolio review. Several accounts had been flagged for shared or mismatched identifying information, and the account holder was asked to verify her identity and confirm the accounts within 30 days, or the accounts would be referred for formal fraud investigation. It was addressed to me at my real address, because somewhere in 14 months, a single form had carried my true information, and the machine, dumb and honest in a way my family wasn't, had finally noticed that a person named Myra Foster seemed to exist in 2 places at once. I read that letter 4 times, standing at the mailbox in my work clothes, and I started quietly to laugh. The bad kind. The kind that's just crying that got dressed. Because I understood what it meant, and I understood what it meant they were racing. The bank's own machine had smelled the wrong line. The clock was already running, and there was exactly one way for my family to stop it. Get the named borrower, get me, to sign something that said the accounts were hers and always had been. Confirm the accounts. Wear the coat on purpose. Turn 30 days from a countdown into a door that quietly closed. That's what Saturday's pen had been. That's what the anniversary was going to be. Because they moved it, you see. They felt me stop calling back. I know they were panicking because Bethany told me they were. She texted me 3 words can we talk? And we met at a diner off the highway where the coffee is bad, and nobody we knew would ever be. And for the first time in the 8 years, she'd been married to my brother, my sister-in-law, and I had an actual conversation. Her daughter was asleep in the booth beside her, under a coat, 4 years old, fist curled up by her cheek. And Bethany kept one hand on the little girl's back the whole time, like a person steadying something in a moving car. She told me how it started for her, and it was the same door I'd walked through, just a few years ahead. When she and Danny were newer, back when the shop was still doing fine, the family had asked her for A small favor. A phone call. There'd been a form, she said, some financing thing for the business, and they'd needed someone to answer if the company called to verify a reference, and Danny had put her on it, and my mother had made it sound like paperwork, like being a bridesmaid, like the kind of small yes you give people you're trying to be loved by. I said yes because I wanted them to like me, she said, and she laughed the way I'd laughed at the mailbox. That's the whole trick, isn't it? They find the thing you want and they charge you for it. She didn't know then whose name had really been on that first form. She found out the way I did, slowly, and then all at once. And when she'd finally asked Danny straight out, a year ago, whether they'd used his sister's name, he hadn't denied it. He'd gotten angry. He'd said it was family business, and she was family now, and family doesn't ask. And when she pushed, the whole machine had turned on her, the way it turns on everyone eventually. My mother went cold, Corinne started the little comments, and Bethany learned what the corner chair by the bookshelf was for. It's for whoever's asking too many questions this year. I'd sat in every seat at that table, except that one. I hadn't even known it was the punishment seat. She'd been sitting in it for me. Why now? I asked her. Why are you telling me now? She looked down at her daughter, and then she told me the part that made me put my coffee down and not pick it up again. In the last 2 weeks, as I'd gone quiet and the family had started to sweat, Corinne had said something to her. Half a threat, dressed as concern, the way they do everything. That if Bethany was thinking of making trouble, of taking Danny's side against the family, or God forbid Myra's, she should think hard about how a custody thing would go, about how easy it is, when a whole family tells the same story, to make a mother look unstable, about who the courts believe when it's one scared woman against a united, respectable clan, who all, sadly, shake their heads and say she hasn't been well. They said that to me about you too, I said quietly. The exact same words. She hasn't been well. I know. Her jaw was tight. It's the only move they have. It's the only move they've ever needed. She smoothed her daughter's hair. But I sat there while they said it about me, and I thought about her, the little girl under the coat, growing up in this, learning that this is what family does, learning to sit in the corner chair and call it love. And I decided I'd rather be the crazy one who left than the good one who stayed. She met my eyes, steady now. You decided the same thing. I could see it at the last dinner. That's why I followed you out. I wasn't warning a stranger. I was warning the only other person at that table who could still count. We sat there a while. 2 women the family had spent years keeping apart, so we'd never do exactly this. Before we left, she wrote her number on a napkin. Her real number, she said, not the phone Danny could see. And she folded it into my hand and closed my fingers over it. And it was such a small thing, and I've kept it, the way I keep the ledger, in the drawer with the originals. Then she carried her sleeping girl out to a car she'd already half-packed, and I understood that whatever else happened, one good thing had already come loose from all of this. A mother and her daughter were going to get out of that family, and they were going to get out because the family's favorite weapon had finally for once been pointed at someone willing to walk into the blast. The campaign changed key. My mother's warm calls went cold, and then went to Corinne, who called to inform me, not invite, inform, that our parents' 40th wedding anniversary was that coming Saturday, that there'd be a party at the house, that the whole family was coming, aunts and uncles, and the cousins from Ohio, and that everyone is really hoping you'll do the right thing while we're all together. She let that sit. Then, in case I'd missed it. It'd be a shame to embarrass Mom and Dad in front of everyone, Myra, on their anniversary. You've always been dramatic, but you're not cruel. They were going to do it in a full room. They'd learned from the dinner that a jury of 4 could be walked out on. So they'd empanel 20. put the pen in front of me in the middle of a party, with my father's face falling and the cousins watching, and let the whole weight of everyone's discomfort push my hand down onto the page. Sign, and be the good daughter who saved her family at the party. Refuse, and be the monster who ruined an anniversary over paperwork. They didn't need me to want to sign. They needed me surrounded. The break came from Danny, 3 days before it. He showed up at my apartment, the first time he'd ever been there, at 9 at night, and he stood in my doorway, not quite crying, the big brother from the lake, gone gray and small. "You have to just do this," he said. "Please. You don't even understand what you're—" He stopped. He looked at my folder on the table, the fat one, and something went across his face. "If you don't sign by the 30th, he said very low, "we're all done. All of us. Do you get that? It's not just me. Mom and Dad are on the—" And he shut his mouth so hard I heard his teeth click. "On the what, Danny?" I said, gently. "The way you coax the last of it out of a witness who wants to tell you." But he'd caught himself. "Just sign it," he said, and his voice cracked down the middle. "You were always the one who fixed things. Why are you making this the one you won't fix?" And there it was. The whole family creed in a single sentence, spoken by the brother who used to carry me. "You exist to fix us, and refusing is the only sin." He left. I stood in my doorway a long time after his taillights were gone. Then I went inside and wrote down the date he'd said, the 30th, and under it, I wrote, "They think it's a deadline. It's a confession." And I closed the folder, and I made the calls I should have been too scared to make, and wasn't anymore. I need to tell you what I was walking into when I made them, because it changed how I made them, and it's the part that still surprises people. My family didn't sit still and wait for me to gather evidence. While I was pulling records, they were pulling something too, a story. And they were spreading it in the one place I couldn't subpoena, the family. Aunt Louise called me on a Thursday. My father's sister, the one with the church coat and the kind face. A woman who used to slip me butterscotch at my grandmother's funeral. She called just to check on me, and I knew within a minute that she'd been sent. She asked very softly how I was sleeping. She asked whether I'd been feeling overwhelmed lately. She said my mother was just so worried, that they all were, that nobody's mad at you, honey. We just want you to get some help before this goes too far. And then, gently, the barb inside the cotton. "These stories you've been telling, about loans, about your name. Sweetheart, you know how that sounds. You've always had such an imagination, ever since you were little." I sat down on my kitchen floor for that one, because I understood, all at once, what they were building, and it was so much smarter than a lie. They weren't going to say the loans didn't exist. They were going to say I was unwell. They were preloading the room. By the time I ever stood up with my folders, the entire family would already have been told, kindly, over weeks, that poor Myra was coming apart, that she lived alone and worked too hard, and had started imagining that her own family had stolen from her. Every piece of evidence I brought would land not as proof, but as symptom. The forger's masterstroke isn't the forged signature. It's convincing everyone the victim can't read. "I'm sleeping fine, Aunt Louise," I said. "But thank you for calling. Remember that you called, okay? Remember I sounded fine." She didn't understand that yet. She would. Corinne took it a step further. On Friday, she came to my work. She'd never once visited my office in 11 years. But there she was in the lobby of a hospital administration building, in front of my badge-scanning coworkers, saying my name too loud, asking the security guard to, "Please just tell Myra Foster, her family is here, and it's about a medical situation." A medical situation. She stood in my professional life, the one clean room I'd built entirely away from them, and she performed a concerned sister staging an intervention for an unstable woman, loud enough for the receptionist to hear, and when I came down, she said, "Quiet now, just for me. Everyone up here seems to think you're so together. I wonder what they'd think if they knew." She smiled. "Sign the paper, Myra. Come back to the family. Or we start telling people you need help. We're already telling people. We'll just tell more." I walked her out. I kept my face the way I keep it. And on the elevator back up, I stopped being scared in a way I have never unstopped since, because there is a specific clarity that arrives the day the people who made you threaten to unmake you in public, and it is the coldest, steadiest feeling I know. That afternoon, I made the call I'd been afraid of. I found a lawyer who does consumer fraud, not a family friend, not somebody from church, a stranger I paid for an hour. And I laid it all out, and she listened without one flicker of the pity I'd been drowning in. And then she told me three things that became my spine. She said, "What you're describing, if the records show it, is criminal identity theft and bank fraud, and it does not matter one bit that they're your family. The law does not have a holiday for that," she said. "File the federal report and the police report first, today, because those are the keys that force the lender to act and that protect you if this ever reaches a courtroom." And then she said the thing that made the whole picture snap into focus. The thing I think about every time I remember Bethany shaking on that porch. "Whatever you do," she said, "do not sign anything they put in front of you. Not an acknowledgement, not a modification, not a family repayment agreement, nothing. Right now, you are a victim of a crime, and the law is entirely on your side. But if you sign a paper that says this debt is yours, if you affirm it, if you make a single payment on it, you may be found to have ratified it. You'd be telling the world you consented after all. You would walk yourself out of being the victim and into being the borrower, and you'd do it with your own hand." She let that sit. "Is anyone pressuring you to sign something?" I started to laugh, the bad laugh again, the crying that got dressed. "They've scheduled it," I said, "at my parents' anniversary, in front of the whole family, next Saturday." She was quiet a moment. "Then next Saturday," she said, "is the most dangerous day of this for you, and the most important. Go in having already filed everything. Once the fraud investigation is open, their paper can't help them anymore. But it can still hurt you, right up until you've made yourself untouchable. So make yourself untouchable first. Then you can walk into any room you like." I hung up and I understood the shape of the whole thing at last. They weren't racing to save Danny. They were racing to get my signature before the machine finished noticing, and they'd bring the whole family to hold me down long enough to do it. And they'd salted the ground first, so that if I ran instead of signed, I'd look like the crazy one who ruined an anniversary. It was, I have to say, an almost perfect plan. It had exactly one flaw. It required me not to read the fine print, and reading the fine print is the only thing I have ever been truly good at. People imagine the moment you fight back is loud. It isn't. Mine was a week of forms. I want to walk you through it because if you are ever standing where I stood, I don't want you to feel the way I felt at the start. Like the machinery all belongs to them, and there's nothing a person can do but pay or lose. There is something you can do. It's tedious, and it's unglamorous, and it is a wrecking ball if you swing it right. I started at the federal identity theft site, and I filed the report. It generates an official document, a real one, with a number, and that document is a key that opens locks. With it, I placed a fraud alert, and then a full freeze on my credit, so no one could open a fourth line while I was busy with the first three. Then I drove to my actual police station and sat in a plastic chair for 2 hours and filed a report in person, because a report number from a live human detective is worth more than anything you can do from a couch. And I got one, and I wrote it on the inside cover of my folder like a talisman. Then I went at the lender, but not the way you'd think. I didn't call to argue. I sent them, certified mail, a fraud affidavit, the sworn statement that these accounts were opened without my knowledge or consent, with the federal report attached. That does something specific. Under the law, once a lender receives a proper identity theft affidavit and report, they can't just keep collecting and reporting the debt as valid. They have to block it and investigate. I wasn't asking them a favor. I was handing them an obligation. And then, because the affidavit gave me standing, I asked for the one thing that would end the argument before it started. I asked for the application file. All of it. Not the loan agreement, the metadata, the audit trail every online lender keeps and hopes no one ever requests, the IP address the application came from, the device fingerprint, the timestamps, the email that received every confirmation, the geolocation on the e-signature. The machine remembers everything. The machine had been quietly writing down the truth in the background of the crime the entire time. It came back in 11 business days, and I read it at my kitchen table with the ledger open beside me for company, and it was better than I'd let myself hope. The $62,000 application had been submitted from an IP address that resolved to a small business account, Foster Heating and Air. The device that signed it had signed the other two as well. The confirmation email, the near-miss version of my name, had been created 11 minutes before the first loan was applied for, 3 years ago, and every alert the lender ever sent about my stolen name had gone there, to a mailbox I'd never see, a mailbox that forwarded, I would later learn, to my brother's phone. And the e-signature on the 62,000, the one dated a Tuesday at 11:52 in the morning, had been executed from a phone whose location, in that moment, was not the ninth floor conference room, where I sat with 11 witnesses and my own phone in a basket by the door. It was the shop, the oldest loan, the 45 with the wet ink, I sent to a forensic document examiner, along with a stack of my genuine signatures, a decade of them, checks and cards, and the closing on my own boring paid-off condo. Her preliminary came back in careful, expensive language that boiled down to 4 words I could have kissed her for, not written by Myra. The loops on the M, she wrote, were formed by a right hand that had learned a different name. I had a federal report, a police case number, a lender legally on notice, an audit trail pointing at a single shop, and a forensic opinion that the one ink signature in the whole scheme wasn't mine. I did not have a confession, and I did not need one. That's the part my family never understood about me, the part they mistook for coldness their whole lives. I don't need you to admit it. I only need it to be true and provable and written down where the little numbers live. Bethany gave me the last piece, and she gave it the right way. Not as a weapon she was handing me, but as a truth she was finally willing to stand behind. She met me in the same faraway grocery lot, and she gave me her phone for 30 seconds. She'd photographed the first application, 3 years ago, over Danny's shoulder, before she understood what she was looking at. I thought it was for the business, she said. I didn't know it was her name until later, and by the time I knew, I was in it too. The photo showed the near-miss email being typed, and then she did the thing that cost her the most. She wrote it down. A plain, signed statement, dated, in her own words, about what she'd seen and been asked to do and been threatened with when she said she wanted out. I have a daughter, she said again, like it was the whole reason, and it was. Whatever happens to me for this, she's going to know her mother told the truth once it mattered. I told her she didn't have to come Saturday. She said she was coming. She said it the way a thing you've decided in the car with the engine off. 2 days before the party, the letter I'd been waiting for came, and it was the one that made me untouchable. The lender's fraud unit wrote to confirm what the law had forced. My affidavit and the federal report were received. The 3 accounts were flagged as disputed and frozen, pending formal fraud investigation. And the sentence I read 4 times, standing at the same mailbox where the clock had started. No payment, settlement, or acknowledgement could be accepted on the disputed accounts while the investigation was open. Read plainly, it meant the machine had taken the pen off the table. The one document my family needed from me, the acknowledgement, the confirm the accounts paper, could no longer do the thing they needed it to do, because I'd filed the thing that turned it into paper. My lawyer had told me to make myself untouchable first, and then walk into any room I liked. 2 days before the anniversary, holding that letter in the cold, I became untouchable. The strange part, the part I still turn over, is that the same machine that took 14 months to notice a woman existing in 2 places at once moved, once I pushed it, in a matter of days. All that time the fraud had been sitting in plain sight, and the system had let it, because no one had asked it to look. That's the whole thing, isn't it? The crime survives on no one reading the line. The second someone reads it out loud, it can't survive at all. That same afternoon, my mother left me a voicemail. Warm again. She can turn it on like a tap. She said she loved me. She said she couldn't wait to see me Saturday, that it was going to be a beautiful day, that we'd put all this behind us and be a family again. She said, "Bring that appetite, we're doing the big cake." She had no idea that 3 streets away, her daughter was standing at a mailbox, holding the letter that had already ended the plan, listening to her mother invite her to a party that was now going to be something entirely different from what either of us had thought a week ago. I saved the voicemail. It's the last time I ever heard her voice do the warm thing, and I keep it the way I keep the rest of the originals. Not to hurt myself with, just because it's true. And I've decided to be a person who keeps what's true. The night before the anniversary, I sat alone in my apartment, with everything laid out on the table, in the order I'd read it: certified loans, audit trail, the examiner's letter, the federal report, the police number, Bethany's statement, and on top of the whole stack, the ledger. And I will tell you the truth about that night, because it's the part that matters more than the paperwork. I almost didn't go. Not out of fear of the room, out of grief for what walking into it with that stack meant. Because as long as I stayed home, they were still my family. Broken, dishonest, using, but mine. The lake was still real. The shoulders were still real. And I knew, the way you know a weight before you lift it, that if I set that file on the table in front of the cousins from Ohio, there would be no more Sundays, no more roasts, no more group chat, even the cruel one. I would be, finally and permanently, exactly what my mother's note had voted me: erased. The difference was only who held the pen. I sat with that for a long time. Then I did the thing my grandmother taught me on a stool in a bakery when I was too young to know it was the most important thing anyone would ever teach me. I read the last line. Not the big number. 62,000, 141,000, the numbers they wanted me drowning in. The little one nobody checks. The one that said, "A family that has to forge your name to keep you is not keeping you." They lost me 3 years ago, at a screen, 11 minutes before the first loan. Saturday wasn't going to be the day I lost them. It was going to be the day I found out. I packed the file into my grandmother's old bakery tote, the canvas one, soft as a shirt from 31 years of flour. I put the ledger in last, on top, where I could feel it. And in the morning, I put on something nice, because my mother had told me to. And for the first and last time in my life, I did exactly what she said. The house looked beautiful. I'll give them that too. There was a banner over the porch, 40 years, and my mother's good tablecloths on the folding tables in the yard, and a cake from the grocery bakery that used to be my grandmother's, though no one but me would think of that. Cousins I hadn't seen since a funeral. The uncles by the grill, pretending to know how to work it. Aunt Louise, my father's sister, in her church coat, holding a plate. 20-some people in a yard, laughing at something outside the frame, and me walking up the driveway with a canvas bag on my shoulder that weighed as much as the last 3 years. Bethany was already there, by the fence, apart, the way they always place her. She caught my eye once, and I saw her breathe out. Danny wouldn't look at me at all. He stood by the grill, with a beer he wasn't drinking, and every few seconds his eyes went to my bag, and away, like a man watching a wasp. My mother worked the yard like the queen she is. She hugged me in front of the cousins, a real-looking hug, warm for the audience, and against my ear, quiet, for me. I knew you'd do the right thing today. She pulled back, smiling. She thought the bag was my purse. She thought I'd come to sign. They let me have a paper plate and 20 minutes of small talk. Then my father tapped a fork on a glass, and the yard gathered, and I understood the theater had begun. He gave a little speech about 40 years. It was fine. He's not a monster in the way that's easy to point at. That's the thing about my father. He talked about hard times and sticking together, and how a family is the only thing that lasts. People raised cups, and then my mother stepped up beside him and put her hand over his on the glass, and turned the whole warm afternoon with a single, graceful pivot. While we're all together, she said, all of us, which never happens anymore, I want to say something about family, about what it means. Her eyes found me across the yard, gentle as anything. Some of us have had a hard year. My Danny's had a hard year. A murmur of sympathy. And the beautiful thing, the thing my mother taught me. And there, she reached for my grandmother, in front of me, and used her like a serving spoon. Is that when one of us is drowning, the rest of us don't ask questions. We reach in. Corinne appeared at her shoulder on cue. She was holding the note, and a pen. We just think, my mother said to the yard but at me, that it's time. That family helps family. And that anyone who'd let their own brother lose everything, over pride, over paperwork, over some need to feel superior, well, a soft, sorrowful smile at the cousins. That's not how we raised her. It was masterful. I want you to sit in how masterful it was. In 60 seconds, in front of 24 people, she had made the story. Danny is drowning. Myra can save him and won't. Myra thinks she's better than us. And today, on this sacred day, we're all going to lovingly watch her decide whether she has a heart. Corinne held the pen out across the potato salad. Every face in that yard turned to me, and every one of them had already been told which of us was cruel. I set my paper plate down on the table. I took the canvas bag off my shoulder, and I did not raise my voice, because I have never once won by raising my voice, and I wasn't going to start on the day it mattered most. Before I sign anything, I said, let's all read it together, since we're family. Since family doesn't make family show receipts. I took out the first folder. This is a certified copy of the loan you want me to acknowledge, I said, and I laid it on the tablecloth where the nearest cousins could see it. $62,000. I want everyone to look at one thing, not the amount, the date. I put my finger on it. This loan was opened 14 months ago. I let that sit for one breath. I can't have refused to help pay my brother's loan. According to this paper, I took it out myself, over a year ago, from a company I've never called, at an address I've never lived at. I looked up, not at my mother, at Aunt Louise, who was closest, who had a kind face and no stake. Does that make sense to you? Because it doesn't make sense to me, and I read these for a living. The yard had gone very quiet. The kind of quiet where a furnace would kick on, if it were winter, if we were inside, if this were the last dinner. My mother's smile didn't move, but something behind it did. Myra, she said, warm, sad, and loud enough for the back of the yard. Sweetheart, you did sign it. Don't you remember? You've been under so much stress. She turned, just slightly, to the cousins, taking them with her. She lives alone. She works too hard. We've been worried for a while now, honestly, about her memory, about, you forget things, honey. It's okay. No one's blaming you. She reached toward me like you'd reach toward someone standing on a ledge. We can get you help, but first we have to fix what you've done. And there it was. The oldest move in the book, the one they'd clearly agreed on in the kitchen. If the paperwork was airtight, make the daughter unreliable. Not a victim of fraud. A poor, single, overworked woman who's coming apart and can't be trusted to remember her own signature. Half the yard's faces softened toward me with pity, which is so much worse than anger, and I felt the trap close, warm, and suffocating. And for 1 second, the old machinery in my chest said the old thing. Let them. Be the broken one. It's easier than being the one who blows up the yard. Then I opened the second folder. I thought you might say that, I said. So I brought the part the machine remembers. I laid the pages down, and I turned them so Aunt Louise could read, because I was done talking to my mother. You don't argue with the illusionist. You turn on the lights. This is the application record for that loan. Every online loan keeps one. It writes down where the application came from and what device signed it, down to the minute. I put my finger on the first line. This loan was applied for from an internet account registered to Foster Heating and Air, Danny's shop. I moved my finger. The email that got every notice about my name for the last 3 years was created 11 minutes before the first of these loans. And it isn't my email. It's my name with a number stuck in it, and it forwards to a phone that isn't mine. My finger moved again, and my voice stayed flat and even and terrible. And the electronic signature on this $62,000 loan is dated a Tuesday at 11:52 in the morning. I know exactly where I was that Tuesday at 11:52. I was in a compliance meeting on the 9th floor of my building with 11 co-workers and my phone in a basket by the door. There's a calendar invite. There's 11 people. I looked up. The signature came from a phone at the shop. Nobody in the yard was eating. And it isn't one loan, I said. And I laid down the third folder and the fourth. It's 62,000, 34,000, 45,000. Opened over 3 years. Same email, same address, same device. $141,000. Borrowed by somebody wearing my name. I heard Aunt Louise say, very softly, "Oh," the way you say it at a graveside. The oldest one has an ink signature instead of a typed one. I sent it to a forensic examiner with 10 years of my real signatures. I set her letter on top, facing out. Her finding is one sentence, not written by Myra. My father found his voice then, and it came out wrong. Too big for the yard. That's enough. Not a denial, an order. The order of a man who has run this family on volume for 40 years and has just felt the floor of it move. It's almost enough, I said. There's one more line. You taught me to read everyone. I laid down the money trail. This is the part I'd sat with longest, the part that turned my stomach worse than the forgery. Because a forgery is a thing a desperate man does, and this was a thing a family decided. The oldest loan, the 45,000, it didn't all go to Danny's shop. Half of it did. The other half, $22,000, went out 3 days later in one transfer. I looked at my father, and then, because I'm not cruel but I am thorough, I looked at the cousins from Ohio who had driven 9 hours to celebrate a marriage. To this house, to the mortgage on this house. The house we've all been told, at every barbecue for 10 years, was paid off. I set down the last page, the one from the county, the one anybody can pull for free if they know to look. It's a matter of public record. There's a second mortgage recorded on this property, $95,000. It is not and has not been for a long time paid off. I have never heard a yard full of people go so quiet. Somewhere a paper cup tipped over in the breeze and rolled off a table, and it was the loudest thing. My mother's face was doing something I'd never seen it do. The church smile was still there, but it had come loose at one corner, like a poster in the rain. "You would do this," she said, and her voice had dropped out of its performance register into something flat and true and mean. "On your father's anniversary, in front of everyone. You always did have to be the center of—" "I have one more thing," I said, and I reached into the bag and I took out the ledger. I hadn't planned to. I want you to know that. Everything else I'd planned to the letter, but my hand went in and came out with my grandmother's book, and I opened it to the last page in front of all of them, and my own voice changed when I did it, and I let it. "This is Grandma's," I said. "Her bakery ledger. Some of you sat in that shop." A few older cousins nodded, and Aunt Louise pressed her fingers to her mouth. "She taught me to read every line in here. And on the last page, the last month she ever balanced, the year before she died, the year her hands got bad and her memory got worse, she wrote all our names, the way she did every New Year." I turned the book so they could see the shaky, beloved handwriting. And I always thought that's all this page was. A list of names, and beside mine, 3 words. "Keep her close." My throat did a thing. I let it do the thing. "Some tears you earn? But I read these for a living now," I said. And last month I finally read the line above the names. The one I'd skipped for 2 years, because I was looking at the sweet part. I put my finger on it. It's a number, $18,000, and 2 words in her hand. The shop. In the last year of her life, when she couldn't work the ovens anymore, and couldn't always remember what year it was, somebody in this family talked my grandmother into borrowing against the only thing she ever built alone. The yard was not breathing. She was the first to count. Before me, they practiced on her. And I can't prove this one. It's the only thing I can't prove, but I know it the way you know a wrong number before you check it. I think when she wrote "keep her close" beside my name, she wasn't telling you to keep me handy. She'd just found out what you'd do. She was hiding a warning in the only place she trusted anyone would ever read it carefully enough to find. She was telling me to keep myself close, and it took me 34 years and a folder to hear her. I closed the book. That's when it broke. Not with a confession. They never confessed. Not one of them. Not then and not since. And I want you to remember that, if you're waiting for the part where they admit it, because that part doesn't come, and you don't need it to. It broke with behavior. My brother made a sound I'd never heard a grown man make, and shoved back from the grill, so hard his chair went over into the grass. And he came 2 steps toward me, white to the lips, with his hands out, and said the truest thing anyone said all day. "You were supposed to just sign it," screamed it, spit flying, in front of his own daughter's cousins, in front of everyone. "That's all you had to do, you always—" And Bethany was up out of her chair by the fence, and Corinne was screaming something about ungrateful, and my father was on his feet, with his fist coming down on the folding table, so the potato salad jumped, roaring my name like it was still 1999, and I was still small enough for the volume to work. I didn't move. That's the whole trick if you ever need it. I stood in the middle of my family coming apart at the seams, and I did not flinch, because none of it was aimed at the papers. Not one of them, in all that noise, said the papers were wrong. They said I was cruel, and I was ungrateful, and I was dramatic, and I was supposed to just sign it. They were the loudest people I've ever heard, and not one of them said the thing that would have actually helped them, which was, "That's not true," because it was. "You should know how this works now," I said, when the first wave of it had spent itself, and I didn't say it loud, so they had to go quiet to hear me, and they did, because some old animal part of them still needed to know what the reader had read. There's a federal identity theft report. There's a police case number. It's written in the front of this folder. You can read it. It's real. The lender's fraud unit has all of this, the affidavit and the audit trail. as of 9 days ago. The accounts are frozen, pending a fraud investigation that I did not have to beg for. The law required it the second I filed, which means the paper you brought today, the one you wanted me to sign in front of everyone, it can't save you anymore. It never could after last week. Signing it would only have added my name to yours on the way down. I looked at Danny, who was crying now, openly, the way he did when we were kids. I didn't come here for the money. I make my own. I came here to give you one chance, in front of the people you've been lying to for 3 years, to tell the truth before a stranger with a badge tells it for you. And every single one of you chose to call me crazy instead. I picked up my grandmother's ledger. I left the pen on the table where Corinne had set it, next to the note with the friendly blue logo. And I left all 4 folders too, because they were copies. And I'm the one who keeps the originals now. Then I walked back down the driveway, under the banner that said 40 years, past the cake from the shop that used to be hers, and nobody followed me except Bethany, who caught up at the bottom of the drive with her daughter's hand in hers, and a diaper bag over her shoulder, and a look on her face I can only call daylight. I already packed the car this morning, she said. I wasn't going back either way. We stood at the curb a second. 2 women the family had spent years keeping from comparing notes, finally comparing notes. Then she buckled her girl into a car seat and drove off toward a sister in another state. And I drove home the other way, and this time I did cry, and it wasn't 90 seconds, and it wasn't grief. It was the other thing that looks like grief and isn't. It was relief. Here's how it went after. Since you've come this far, and you deserve the honest ledger, not a tidy one. The fraud investigation did what the law says it does. Faced with a federal report, a police case, an audit trail pointing at one shop, and a forensic opinion, the lender could not keep the debts on my name, and it didn't. All 3 came off, blocked, then discharged as fraudulent. And my credit, my careful, boring credit, came back to being mine. That part took 4 months, and roughly 40 phone calls and a great deal of certified mail, and I did every bit of it myself, and I would do it again tomorrow. The debts did not vanish, though. That's the part people don't understand about forging a family member's name. The money was still real, and once it can't be pinned on the victim, it lands on the people who actually spent it. The lender referred the older loans to its fraud investigators, and eventually, so did the county, because a second mortgage taken to keep up the appearance of one that was paid off is its own small unraveling. I'm not going to narrate my brother's consequences for entertainment. I'll only say that handled, my mother's favorite word, turned out to be the one thing the situation never was, and that the phrase family doesn't make family show receipts is, it turns out, exactly the sentence a family uses when the receipts are the last thing on earth they want you to see. They have not apologized. I want to be truthful about that, because I know some of you are waiting for the scene where my mother shows up at my door undone, and it hasn't happened, and I've stopped keeping the porch light on for it. What I got instead was a group chat I muted, a few voicemails from Corinne that started cruel and got frightened, and one text from my father, months later, that said only, "After everything we did for you." I read it twice, the way I read everything now. Then I did the math on that sentence. Everything they did for me, weighed against everything they did to me, one honest line at a time. And I didn't answer it. And not answering it did not feel like revenge. It felt like closing a book that finally balanced. I set a boundary, and I'll tell you what it is, in case you need the words for your own. I am not available to a family that had to forge my name to keep me. Not for holidays, not for emergencies, not for the version of an apology that's really just a request to go back to being useful. If the day ever comes that anyone in that yard wants to know me instead of use me, to sit across a table and want nothing, the door isn't nailed shut. But it's my door now, and you have to knock, and you have to come empty-handed, and you have to be able to look at me and see a person, instead of an open account. If you've listened this far, it's probably because somewhere in your own life, there's a version of that pen, and someone who keeps sliding it toward you and calling it love. So let me leave you with the only two things worth taking from all of this, and then I'll let you go. First, the kindest people get robbed the quietest because we're the ones who don't check. And reading the fine print on the people who love you is not paranoia, it's self-respect with a pencil. And second, if this is sitting on your chest tonight, tell me in the comments where you are with it. I read everyone, and I promise you that being the reliable one is not the same as being loved, and you are allowed to learn the difference before it costs you $141,000 and a grandmother's warning you almost didn't hear. The ledger sits on my shelf now, in my own apartment, the one with the single reading lamp and the paid-off, boring, mine things. Some nights I open it to the last page, and I read her 3 words again. Keep her close. And I finally read them the way she wrote them. Not a leash, a shield. She spent her last clear year hiding a message for the one grandchild she trusted to look. And the message was, protect the girl who reads every line, because they'll come for her the same way they came for me. So I keep her close. Not the family that voted to erase me, her and myself. The woman she taught on a stool with flour on the page. The one who finally, 34 years in, read the most important line in the whole book all the way to the end. It was my own name, and it turns out it was never for sale. It was just mine.